podcast. I'm Joe Che. I help women build and scale their businesses through group and one on one mentorships, where together we build and implement the structures, systems, and technologies to attract more ideal clients, generate consistent passive income, and expand their impact in the world, all while staying rooted in their feminine essence. I am here with Gina. Hold on, let me try that again. Goodat. I am here with Gina Goodat. She is a nationally recognized relationship expert, licensed psychotherapist, helping people overcome the challenges and build deep, fulfilling relationships. She's the author of the Relationship Roadmap and has over a decade of results driven experience in private practice. Welcome, Gina.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, I would love to start out. I mean, this is 10 years, and my guess is the relationship roadmap is it really a culmination of doing work with so many clients, seeing consistency, seeing patterns in these relationships. So I'd love to start out and hear a little bit more about that. Is it a framework? Is it a guide? What is that exactly?
Well, it did come out of the fact that there's only so many people that I could see in a day, in a week, in a month. And as my waiting list was growing, I realized hey, there's some key components that I can put together in a format that's really easy to access for everybody in their own home, and that I should look at a timeline of a relationship, right? And you have to remember, Joe, I'm turning 60 this coming year. So I myself have gone through, 60 years of a timeline of marriage and children, and now I'm a grandmother. And so I have a bit of experience, underneath my belt. And so I have people that come in that are just actually trying to figure out if they should be together. And so part of it was discernment. Is this something that's going to be a good relationship to begin with? And as I looked at premarital counseling, they were already, scheduled with an officiant to have a wedding. And that usually is the first sort of mechanism into counseling for a lot of people, because if they're doing a traditional wedding, many times the pastor, the minister, the priest, the rabbi, whoever it is requiring them to have some kind of counseling before they blend their lives together. Well, I thought, we got to start way before that. So relationship roadmap goes back into like, are you ready to, get serious, which is, are you going to move in together? Because let's face it, a lot of people live together before they, decide to get married. And some people always live together without having that formal ceremony. So I go from that all the way through couples in crisis, couples that are having conflict, course communication is across the board, something that everybody needs to do, connection, romance, intimacy, all the way down actually to conscious uncoupling. Not that every relationship needs to end by uncoupling, but I think we need to not be afraid to address that sometimes after a long relationship, people get going in different directions and they're not good for each other anymore. So amicably parting ways is something that I address, as well as putting people back out on the market. I have people in their 50s, 60s. I just went to a wedding with a couple who was in their 80s that had met on an online dating app and were getting married again. So I write plenty of profiles for people for dating apps as well.
That is beautiful. I mean, it's so true. And for me, I have a framework. It's called the connection map, and the section that I called is the intention for life merging, which is this is where, and it's interesting to me because people often say the relationship is complicated, and what I have found is it's almost always related to this intention of merging your life, this idea of the pacing. Everyone has different life merge pacing. We meet and how fast before we're, exclusive, how fast before we're moving in together or visiting our families. These are all the arc of this life merge pacing in relationships. And, I always say someone is always faster than the other, and you need to move as slow as the slowest person, or that creates a lot of tension.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I talk to couples, one has cold feet, One wants them to, have do the proposal. They want the ring. It's, the clock is ticking, especially for women that want to have babies. And you cannot lock something in until both are really sure about that commitment and they feel confident in it. So you're spot on with that. The first book that I wrote, Love Metabolism, talked about, that exact same thing. What are people's needs and wants on the frequency, the intensity, the duration of all aspects in a relationship? And always someone feels that they're just not quite getting their needs met, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and then we learn how to use communication techniques to say that in a way that creates more connection instead of disconnection. You know, and when I'm teaching communication, I always look at three levels. There's the first level, which is, the harsh one. Is like it's very I statements or you statements, right? So in other words, you made me feel this way. Level two communication is like a non-violent communication, which is I felt this way when it happens. But then I've realized there's actually a level three communication. I've written a whole bunch of free AIs on this, where you actually open up dialogue, you create curiosity, you be on the same team instead of separating the you and I. It's like, how do we do this? And I'm curious your experience, and because I love you, and because I want this result, which is to feel closer. And you know, there's techniques that are really skills. And one of the hardest lessons I ever learned is love is not enough. And that was it really was a brutal lesson that I think a lot of people have experienced, is that there's skills necessary to be in a healthy relationship, right? And I'm sure this is what you're working on with your clients and in these programs.
Well, yes. And unfortunately, we're not taught that as children
Yeah.
because most of our parents did not have that skill. Their grandparents did not have that skill. There was nothing that they learned in school about how to properly communicate in how you're saying with curiosity, not with judgment, not with blame, not with defensiveness. So we are starting in this new generation to teach which is like the foundation of getting along with each other. I mean, I had 10 couples today in my office, each one unique, but everyone with a communication breakdown of something or another. I mean, one couple got back from what should have been a wonderful holiday vacation, and I learned that they fought the whole time, and who was doing more of the work and who was carrying more of the luggage and who was carrying the baby more and who got the better sleep, who saw more of the, and it was more competition. And you did this and I did this, and everything that you have just described is what I hear daily in my practice.
Yeah, I can hear that. And I've experienced that myself and experienced with working with others too. And it's like, the number one predictor of happiness by a Harvard study of adult development is healthy relationships. And, in school, in our education, how much of this were we taught? I mean, literally, I don't think I was taught any of it. And, and my parents, they put me in a private school. It was a religious school. And, I'm grateful for that. But man, it's like there's home economics, right? You can learn some basic life skills, checkbooks and cooking, and we're not learning or being taught any of this. And it's coming from generally our primary caregivers and how they're interacting with each other. And, you know, they were not taught anything. They figured it out the best they can, and they're doing the best they can to show. But like these skills are not out there. Yeah, I always joke I want to create a certification where you can't date anyone until you've learned certain skills. Or like if you have this certification, then it's like a gold star in the dating profile of like, hey, listen, this man has at least learned these skills, or at least been exposed to these communication skills, understanding a woman's needs, understanding her cycles, just understanding some things that without those it creates a lot of tension. you
Well,
know
Joe, we're going to have to partner on this because I
Great.
did, I did just create a quiz on my website that says, "Are you ready for a real relationship?" And it's literally only 5 questions. But I think we need to do a second one, you and I together, specifically on the communication skills, because what you're saying about parents, it's not just that, it's that our entire society is based on competition. And we're trying to get the best grades. We're trying to measure up. We're trying to get picked for the team. We're trying not to get cut from the competition. We're trying to win the tournaments. We're trying to be hired on the interviews. We're trying to get accepted into colleges. And all these things are really based on winning and losing. So it's not surprising to me when a couple comes into my practice and a lot of the banter back and forth is about who's more right, who's more wrong, who's got the best point of view, whose opinion is backed more on the research, which ones are feeling based, which ones are analytical. And it's all that competition that really is in our society. Like, instead of kind of being together on things and realizing, well, there's always more than one way to do things and two truths can be happening at one time, that just blows people's mind. My truth is always the one that's more truthful, right? And so this competition, I just think it's weaved into our society.
It's so true. And it's also, we're competing for these mates, right? We want the prettiest, smartest, successful, tallest, whatever it is. And, I've really noticed that a lot of people are looking for these check boxes that aren't really what's bringing them happiness. It's like an idea, and they're all rooted in, I think, beautiful intentions of, like, if a woman is looking for a man that's successful, what she's really looking for is safety. She wants to feel safe for her and her family, that they're going to have be provided for, or that if a man is tall and has a six pack, and all these things. And I remember reading this really funny study about the triple six man, over 6 feet tall, makes over figures, and has a six pack. And they did this. Have you seen this one? And then, and they did, like, how many men are actually out there that fit this profile, and then how many of them are single, and then the question becomes, how many of them are a good fit for you? And it was just some astronomically low number. And it's like, when we approach these relationships on things like that, we don't tend to really come into a place of ease and happiness. And it's really why I developed the connection map. And to give you an idea, it's a visualization of a connection. It has 4 chords, and you can see where you're high and low in each part and compare it to your partner, and it helps create conversations. But one of them is your communication ease. Another one is your task ease, which means, like, how easy can you do when they went on that vacation? How easy, do you perceive it being for you? And because I realized, I'm neurodivergent, so sometimes I struggle with connection and communication. So I've had to really dig deep and learn these skills for myself to be able to make good decisions and kind of see where things are going wrong. And I want to take your quiz. I love that you got 5 questions. Mine are definitely a lot more than that. It takes about 3 or 4 minutes, you know but it's like, I had to look and say, why isn't this working? And I met a woman from Sweden. I was doing facilitating there, and amazing connection. And when I took the connection map, it kept saying, your lifestyle alignment's too low. Your lifestyle alignment's too low. And I'm like, but she'll move to Bali and see this amazing life. And maybe, I'll visit her in Sweden. And we did that for 6 months. And ultimately, we had to have the conversation in this uncoupling process. And I have a free uncoupling process on my website too, because this is crucial, right? To come
Mhm.
into the relationship with as much love, to exit as with as much love as you came in. And I think that is a real hallmark of a true connection that has unconditional love, regardless if it leads to a family or marriage. If you can do that, your skill level, both of your skill levels, is probably pretty high.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I always say the opposite attracts thing is a myth, not in the fact that it is very intriguing for us to get to know people that are exotic or different or come from different places. But as you mentioned, the similarities are going to be what's going to create the easiest bond.
Yeah.
And even though we see all kinds of people mixed together in my practice, it does ring true that if you have someone who say is a paleo and gets together with a vegan or a vegetarian, well, you're making a lot of different meals for your kids, and it could be really an interesting way of exposure, but it is more difficult, right? It's double the work in the kitchen. And you can have, same with religion, you can have a Hindu marry a Muslim or a Christian marry a Jew, and it's great for exposure for the kids. But again, you're doing double the holidays, and it just a little bit. And I'm not prejudiced. I feel like I don't discriminate. I just tell people you need to find another you. In a lot of ways, you need to find another you, because otherwise, you're asking your partner to adapt, or you're not being true to yourself. And sometimes you are making commitments to do things that aren't true to your character, right? In order to make it
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was did a podcast with David Hayworth, this naked pastor, and he's very like in the Christian realm and works with a lot of people in that. And what he was finding that was very interesting, and there's some other research that backs this up, that the different religions actually can mix together if there is a deep respect for what each other's belief system is. And it's actually not the religious philosophy, but the underlying core values associated with the individual. So for example, if someone really values freedom or open-mindedness and the other person has or doesn't have that, that tends to be a good indication on the alignment section, what I call the alignment section in a connection. And I thought that was really interesting because you would really think, like, if a Christian is with a Jew, that it's going to cause a lot of tension and problems. But what people are actually finding is it's really about the underlying core values. And if those are similar, the sort of the philosophical or the expression of those ideas can be compatible, and your kids get a hell of a lot more holidays, especially if you're a Christian. You get lots of time off, lots of time with the family,
Exactly.
which I think is really beautiful of these core value alignments, which you know many people are not talking about as they're entering into relationships. And you know, I recently was exposed to a book by the Gottman Institute called Eight Dates, I believe, if you're familiar with that. And it's so funny. I was writing the same book with my friend Kasha Nast because I'm like, we need to know the questions you have to ask before you get in a relationship. And then the woman I'm dating, Ala, shows me this book. I'm like, oh my God, this book is already done. This is great. And going through that, there are questions you can ask each other that will sort of just uncover and create the conversations to figure out, like, hey, listen, I'm attracted to you. I want you. This is fun. This feels really good. And are we a good practical match? Are the components there? Is that sort of connection map in alignment to be what I'm calling a golden relationship? Because, I want to get away from the words the one, Mr. Right, Mrs. Right, because it has a lot of context in the fairy tale Disney, which I'm sure you can attest to is not very it's not very realistic.
There is not one soulmate. People want to believe that. And I tell when I'm putting people on the dating sites and helping to teach them, how short a meetup should actually be and what an interview looks like, and, how you get to know someone just for seeing who they are and being open to not judge them, but just looking at a lot of material out there as amazing human beings and not just being desperate. So when I teach people this, I say, I know you're not going to like hearing this, but 7 out of 100 probably could be a good match for you. And they're like, only 7 out of 100. But then again, I have to date 100 people. I'm like, no, 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 no. They're buried in there. It's just that, as you go through sort of the algorithms of this and the number game in this, you can try to praise someone into your sphere, or you can work the numbers of trying to meet up with 100 people and find those 7 amazing, wonderful, golden nuggets that are right for you. And they're usually, they do come from that Disney, Hallmark, all the music lyric philosophy that, there's just that one, and they can spin a story about, oh, I met this one person and it was just a divine appointment, like I saw them when they were walking on the beach, and we had the same breed of a dog, and so I know it's the one. I'm like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. You said no children, and they have 10 kids. So it's like, it's really going to be the one for you. And it's like kind of what you're saying is we have to keep our head on, but also open our heart.
Yeah. And that can be hard a lot of the times. It's very easy, especially as we get older. I'm approaching 50, and sometimes you go through things and your heart gets hurt. You go through a divorce, you get jaded, and opening your heart again is a difficult process, and it takes time, and it takes bravery to say, yeah, I've been hurt, and I can open my heart again, and be with someone in that presence, in that care, and come from a place of unconditional love, as opposed to trying to get to a goal. Because many people, is a very true and beautiful desire to go into a deep partnership, to build a family, to have kids. But one experience I've had is, I've dated some people that it feels like I'm getting more interviewed for a role than a connection. And that's really important to me. I recognize is like, I want the connection to come first, and to come from an authentic place, and then allow that connection to unfold into what it truly should be, instead of trying to force it into, is this my partner, is this my husband, is this my, the father of my children, is this my lover, or just a friend or business partner. Just like, how do you be your authentic self and allow for that connection to be true? Do you have any advice for people on this? Because I feel like it's hard for us to do, because we get so caught up in our goal orientation.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is sort of, there's both sides of the spectrum, right? There's keeping your logic on so that we're not swept away just solely with the emotion. And then there's like, let's not just interview, let's feel if there's a spiritual connection there. And ideally, if you can get to know someone as a person before you jump in romantically, that would be my tip, because we are a ball of chemicals. And that's why we choose differently in our 20s than we do in our 40s, 50s, or 60s. And because the reproduction primal need that's just in us, it's like evolutionarily is part of us. We can't get rid of it, like our wisdom teeth. We don't need them, but they're there. So whether you want to reproduce or not, there is this primal attraction. And you can have that with a lot of people that you actually aren't going to have a successful long term connection with. So that's the tricky part. And when you're a teenager and in your 20s, dopamine is one of the strongest things that we experience. And that was designed to get people to come together and reproduce and form families. Problem with that is that because it has one primary factor to itself, it does disappear fairly quickly, like 9 months to 2 years, it's gone, right? People think they've fallen out of love. They haven't fallen out of love, it just changes to oxytocin and a different type of a bonding chemical for faithfulness and fidelity and raising a family and all that. But as we get older and more mature, and I think we begin to understand ourselves better, we are looking for a true connection more than just only chemistry. And many people have already had their kids, or a lot of people, at least in the U.S. Where I live, are planning to not have any kids. And so that can't always be the factor that we're looking for. But chemicals are definitely part of the mating and the dating game.
Yeah. Do you think they need to be there? Like, how strong they need to be? Because when I was doing research, and one of the threads in the connection map is attraction. And what I was finding is, most people think they want their attraction score to be a 10, like at the highest. And what I'm actually noticing is for this golden relationship, this one that's very healthy and long term and etc., we actually don't, when the attraction's a 10, it actually hurts and lowers all the other threads or some of the other threads. And so it's actually better to be somewhere between like a 5 to a 7 in attraction, which is because you don't want it too low and being like, I don't want to have sex here and I'm repulsed, or, I'm disinterested in that physical connection. But when it's kind of, if when it's just kind of like good, where, everything is flowing good, you can do things together, that ease, that communication, the alignment, all these other things are really good. And the attraction is there. You do want to have sex, you do want to kiss, you do want to be affectionate physically, but you're not just like, oh my god, I need to have sex with you all the time every time we get together. That tends to actually distract and overinflate some of these other threads of a connection. So I'm curious, like, what do you think it should be if you meet someone and you're like, you know what, yeah, they're good looking and I find them attractive. I'm not like, don't have that primal sexual, craziness, but it's some there. Like, out of 0 to 10, where do you think it should be in that attraction as you're meeting someone?
I like your seven. I like the idea of seven because people that are so physically oriented that way also, in at least my experience, also can experience jealousy, and they can be insecure about their partner. If they're that attracted, they worry someone else is attracted to their partner too. And then you have this paranoia, and then you can get controlling, and people are looking for cheating when it's not really there. I like Sternberg's love triangle. He did the first research that kind of it sort of was, I think, initially coming out because the love definition was so vague unless you came more from a religious standpoint. In many of the religious tenets, they define like God is the only one that's unconditional love. They talk about agape, they talk about brotherly love, they talk about eros. But Sternberg came from more of a psychological standpoint with his love triangle, and one of the sides is the physical. And this would be love as defined as a relationship, right? Like a intimate relationship. Attraction is one of the sides of the triangle. The other side is the friendship, which has to do with shared hobbies, shared interest, as you mentioned, a lot of the shared values, purpose, upbringing, enjoying the same type of things together. And then the third side of it is actually that commitment, which is, he would define it as exclusivity. Now we have like poly relationships, open marriages, etc. But he defined it as, in religion, it would be the covenant. In law, it would be the contract, the marriage license. But in that, it's actually somewhat of the connection too. It's the promise, whatever the promise is that you're making to show up for that person. Well, when Sternberg took the triangle of love, he said, well, what happens if we just have two of the sides? So let's say we have the commitment, that we're very faithful, and we have the friendship, but we don't have the physical. Then we have this platonic, amazing, very deep, committed friendship, I guess, right? And with a lot of shared hobbies, but just no chemistry. And if you have all the chemistry and you have the friendship and you don't have the commitment, you got cheating. You can have cheating, lying. That's, we have like a lot of affairs. And so any of those two sides put together equals something, because you can have really strong commitment, and you can have a strong physical sex life. But if you have nothing in common, what are you doing with your day? Except for having sex, there's nothing else you have in common. One scuba dives and the other runs marathons. And so he looked at it like that. And so when I try to explain that to my couples, I say, think of it as a table, just like a coffee table or something, and it has three legs, and you chop a leg off, it's not going to stand up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I love that visualization of the triangle. I agree with it very much. And interesting because when we have that deep friendship, right? That's our shared core values, our lifestyle alignment. And the bottom one, what I would say is, and I like looking at as the covenant or the contract. And I would also just add from a spiritual sense, it's just a choosing, it's just a decision that outside of a contract or a religious aspect, it's like, I am going to choose this every day, and I'm going to, and the question becomes, how long do we choose it for? Because there can be this noble suffering that happens in relationship, which is, which, coming from a Catholic background, there's a lot of nobility in suffering. It's like the more you suffer, the more noble you are, the more godly you are. And I've had to learn how to let that go and realize, no, is this relationship serving our highest good for each other most of the time in general? And it doesn't mean you get out when you're going through a dip or some hard times, which sometimes can last a long time. But in general, is this connection helping me, one, allowing me to be myself, be able to express my authentic self, or is it suppressing? One question I like to ask people is, do you feel more of yourself in this relationship, in this connection? And when it's a hard no, and we've all been there, right? You are suppressing who you are, you're compromising so much that it's like, hey, it's not a good sign. And so that's like one question that I like to ask myself, and it can be a really interesting deciding factor. And without that commitment in choosing, it can be a beautiful lovership, temporary. It could be an untethered lovership where you're not intending to make that life merge, and that can be beautiful too. But you got to make sure that you're really matched up on those, or that's going to create tension.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because it was Tuesday of this week. I had a couple come in, both professionals, both working in the city in big tech. They, are 31 or 32. They'd known each other for 4 years. They were going to get married. I think they're actually engaged. They have a yacht, they have a Porsche. They don't have, they have everything. And we were talking about what was the sticking point. And what came out was the woman in this case could not be herself. And she felt like she was walking on eggshells to not put her foot in her mouth, to not say something wrong that would scare him away because she wanted it so bad.
Yeah.
She wanted the babies. She wanted the ring, she wanted the ceremony, and because of it, it was difficult. It was actually exhausting trying to live this life that wasn't her. And she broke down in session. She started crying and she said, I hate your mom.
Okay.
She said he was raised with a single mom and he had maybe an unhealthy bond with his mother. And that day before they came in, they had gone to a big concert, and mom was on one side and she was on the other. And he was in the middle and he was talking to mom, and she said, I just get his back. And mom's here for everything we do and every date. And I try to be so sweet about it. But you know what? I hate that woman.
Mm.
So
And it's
I don't
probably
think
not
it's
even
gonna
a
work. I don't think it's
it's
gonna
probably
work out.
it's in that case, it's like sometimes we create this walking on eggshells for ourselves, and it's not even the other person. And I call it, there's a concept that I call the high value paradox, or sometimes it can be called the hotness paradox. When someone's so attractive and so good looking, or has so much money, or seems like the perfect fit, we want it so bad that we suppress our true authentic nature in order to try to fit into what we think they want, we think they need, that we're projecting on that. And then we become less of ourselves, which actually hurts the connection, so that we actually might not get it. So it's like you need to be with someone that you just like can be yourself with. And we can't blame it on the other person if we're not being ourselves. It's like we need to step up be able to communicate our boundaries, our desires, be able to communicate and be ourselves. Because if you're not being yourself, how do we expect to have a good fit? Because you're fitting with someone else that needs a different fit, or they don't even get to choose if they can't even know, they don't know who you are, so how do they don't even know if they fit with you. So it's like, it's just a reminder that we really have to show up authentically. And I've made this mistake before. This woman, man, I was so infatuated, so gorgeous, 27-year old, Polish model, and so cool. And she was so spiritual. And there was so many things that were so amazing about her. But I was suppressing myself to try to fit in and be part of her world. And, it ultimately, it doesn't work out because, as we know, you need to be with someone that you can feel free. Not, you don't want to be walking on eggshells. No eggshells.
No eggshells. And this does remind me of another couple. Of course, I have a million case studies, but they came in and he was feeling like he couldn't be himself because he was a business owner. He was killing it with his business. He had franchised his business.
Mhm.
He had offers from all over the place. And in essence, she was coming into counseling because she pegged him as a workaholic. And she
Uh,
said that he wasn't prioritizing the family, her, the kids, that he went to work at 5 a.m. He didn't get home till midnight. He was always on his phone, his computer. And I said, did you know this? Did you know this 15 years ago when you got together? And she goes, well, yes, I loved his ambition. I loved his motivation. I wanted, this is what I thought I wanted. But in essence, she didn't want a workaholic. That's what she got. That's what she set her intention. But in the end, as it played out, she wanted like a family man that was dedicated to drop everything at work and prioritize the family.
that's a hard one because, when you're looking at Allison Armstrong's sort of like journey of a man's journey between this like page to knight to prince to king to emperor, so to speak. It's really knights are sexy. That ambition, that drive, that strength, that white horse going out, conquering the world, exploring. It's sexy, and it's not it's not grounded, and they still want to prove something to themselves, to the world, to their partners. They're focused on building their sort of kingdom. And so you got to know what you're choosing, and kind of see, if you're a woman, you got to check where that man is in his journey, and see if that's the right position. And if you're a woman and saying, I want my king, you got to be a queen, and you got to learn these skills and being confident in yourself. And before you call in your king, you actually have to be a queen. And I see this a lot in Bali, all these, I am calling in my king and I am the queen goddess energy. And it's very spiritual, and it's like, honey, you're beautiful, you move great, you do a lot of dancing, and you don't have your shit together. You're not stepping up as a queen that can meet someone that's in that place. So it's like, and there's no judgment on that, but it's more of just, we need to sometimes be self-aware of where we are in our journey. And it's okay if you're young and you want that sexy man or that sexy woman and you want to have a great time. Great, go do that, but don't expect them to step up as a grounded father and a provider, because they're not in that stage. It's not what they want.
Nope, it's the conqueror state. I teach a lot about the codependent, independent, interdependent, and what that actually looks like. Because people had taught so long, oh, don't be codependent on someone else. Don't let them take care of all the 100% of the finances. Don't do the prince and then the king and all of that. You have to also hold your own, or you lose all control. You lose any type of agency if you don't bring something to the table yourself, right? If you're just being taken care of. But then we had people becoming extremely independent where they were running parallel lives. And I'm not saying you shouldn't just have two separate bank accounts or something like that. I'm talking about two separate lives with no connection, no crossover. So I started talking a lot about interdependence, right? Like how to share your life but still not lose yourself.
Yeah, so important, so important. Because as soon as you lose yourself, there's no one there left to connect with, right? You're showing up in the way that you think you want someone else to show up, and that it doesn't work. Gina, we're coming to the end of our time. What a beautiful, I really enjoyed this, and I really resonate with who you are and what you're doing in this world. Thank you so much. And if viewers want to find you, we have, it's the best way, the Instagram or the website. I'll put it in the show notes, both of them. But we have Gina Goodatt, GinaGuddAT.com is the website. Instagram is Gina L. Goodatt, GinaLGUDDAT. And who should be connecting with you? Couples that really want to go deeper?
Absolutely. Couples in any stage of their relationship. So, if they want to go deeper, if they're struggling with communication, I have several wonderful courses and modules on communication. If they're in a crisis, and it doesn't have to be an affair, it could be any kind of crisis. If you're having a crisis about if you where you're moving to, if you need to change careers because you have to be supportive of your partner and that may end up creating a move in location. It could be I have people come in because they lost their dog. Is a crisis. I mean, or their mother. I mean, any kind of crisis. I mean, people get sick, they have diagnosis that maybe are unfortunate. And discernment counseling, is this, too good to leave? Is it too bad to stay in? And that kind of discernment is something that I talk about as well as conscious uncoupling as you do. So couples can come. Like I said, I have free quiz on are you ready for a relationship, which is
Yeah.
if you're single. And then I have another quiz that's rate your current relationship. And these are both free on my website. So I'm excited to have some people take those quizzes, give me some feedback of what they scored, and then that will help kind of direct them as far as their next steps.
I love that, Gina. I need to take that. I'm curious if I'm ready or not. I think I am, but you know. Um, and also, I have a bunch of free giveaways on the connectionmap.com. I have an uncoupling process. I also have a quiz. I want you to try the quiz, Gina. I'm curious. I'm gonna go and try yours right after. I'd love you to try mine. It's just at the Connection Map, and just I would love for you to see the visuals and see if you what resonates, or if maybe you have some feedback of like actually maybe we need to add or take something away. I would love your opinions on that because I just feel like this is your sole purpose and you are making money, you're in it. And, it's a reminder that when we are in our sole purpose and doing what we truly love, we're working out of passion, we're making good money at it, and we're impacting people in a way that we're really supposed to be doing. It's coming from a real heart space. And I feel that from you. I think that's really beautiful. So, uh, thank you, Gina, for being with us on the Women of Soul, Soul Purpose Alignment, and have everyone out there. Thanks for listening. Please feel free to connect with us directly in our social media or our website. I answer all my messages personally, and I'm sure Gina will get back to you also. So, thanks everyone for listening, and have a wonderful day.